to try to work things through and keep a marriage intact. Do you remember that?
I was doing my best to sort of advise Bron to do her best to see if she could work through it. She had a previous marriage. I knew John was very controlling, with money and all the rest of it. She was on that tight a budget that she used to hand sew all the kids' little summer dresses and things like that. But I was just sort of doing my best to see if she tried everything before she threw the towel in. Too many people have probably got this fairy tale that you're going to meet someone and you have your first kiss and life's a bed of roses for the rest of your life, like a good marriage or a long-lasting marriage or something that's worked at, and you just need to be good mates and good friends and support each other and that sort of thing. So I was sort of adamant that after witnessing sort of the upbringing I had, I thought it was a good idea for Bron to maybe at least try as much as she could.
But Deb Hall knew that a reconciliation was pointless, if not impossible.
To my astonishment, one day she, and I can't remember exactly when it was, but she told me she was going to leave him. And I said, oh, okay, well, where are you going to go? And she said, I've organised a place down in Lennox. I said, well, that's good. I said, well, what does John think? She said, oh, well, he's agreeable to it and I'm going to move down there. And so she did. I did visit her there. She got a dog. The kids always wanted a puppy, and then she thought, well, I'm going to get him a puppy. And I used to think, oh, well, she's really branching out, she's really... And she had a job at the cafe down there, and she was sort of getting on with it. And you'd go down there and the house was lived in. The kids had their stuff, and my kids would go and play, and, it was just a normal environment, albeit a little bit difficult for her.
Why did she even move out?
She didn't have a choice.
It's a jointly owned house.
Not in Don's eyes.
But would it have been a legally jointly owned house, to your knowledge?
Of course it should have been. Of course it would have been.
And in a situation like that, where there's a mother, a father, and two girls being raised ostensibly by Bronwyn, it's normal for the male to leave the family home, not the mum and the kids to be uprooted.
She was forced out, basically. Yeah, I remember having the conversation that she just said she doesn't have a choice. She's going to have to find somewhere to go. And that's when I believe that she'd found that little townhouse down in Byron Street.
Turn left onto Byron Street.
At that time, Michelle and Andy were having their second child, Mitchell. Andy wonders how things would have turned out if their lives had been less hectic then.
We were trying to tell her we had a boy and she was happy, but it all then channeled back to her leaving John. She was leaving, she was going to find somewhere to live. Mitchell was born on the 31st of March. Bronwyn was very preoccupied. That was all happening in her life right then and there.
When Bronwyn had called about the advertisement for the townhouse on March 22 in the Northern Star newspaper, the property's owner and landlady cut her some slack. Shirley Taylor knew it must have been a financial struggle for the newly single young mum. These are Shirley's words to police in September 1998. It's not her voice.
She informed me that she had separated from her husband and was looking for a place to rent. At the time, she had 2 young girls with her. After inspecting the flat, she informed me that she wished to rent it, but told me that she would have trouble paying the $150 a week rent. I told her that she could move in and we would see how things go.
Shirley also asked for a bond of $700. A cheque for the amount was signed by John Winfield. Bronwyn handed it over the same day.
Whilst Bronwyn was moving in on that day, her husband John came over to my place and asked for the bond money to be given back to him. I told him that Bronwyn had given me the money for the bond and he was very angry and demanded the money. Because of the way he was acting and his aggressive manner, I gave him back the cheque and he left. A couple of days later, Bronwyn came over to my place and gave me another cheque for $700. I think it was the same cheque that her husband had taken from me.
Shirley grew fond of the young woman.
I came to know Bronwyn fairly well, and I would mind her children if she had to go down the street. I found her to be a most devoted mother who was very attached to her children. I didn't really have any conversations with her about her private life. I do recall, though, that she told me that she hated her husband.
Bronwyn spoke to a solicitor, Tony Mannering, at his office in the nearby town of Ballina. It was a fortnight after she and her daughters had moved out of the house in Sandstone Crescent. John promptly changed the locks up there. He put a deadlock on the front. It was a powerful signal to Bronwyn that she would not be welcome back. The solicitor must have taken careful notes during their first meeting. He and his new client covered a lot of ground. For a pending divorce and a possible battle over custody and property, it was important to have as much information as possible. Mannering summarised the facts and circumstances in a letter that he wrote to Bronwyn on April 6, 1993. His letter was sent to her at the townhouse in Byron Street. These are Tony Mannering's words. It's not his voice.
Dear Madam, we advise your instructions as follows. Instructions as follows. You married your husband on 14 December 1987 at Ballina. Although you did not live with your husband as man and wife prior to your marriage, you did look after your husband's daughter Jodie Lynn Winfield on a full-time basis, sometime prior to your marriage. You separated from your husband on 21 March 1993. Your husband has been married twice before, and you have been married once before. You and your husband have a child together, Lauren Mary Winfield, born 1988. Lauren now lives with you. You have a child from a previous relationship, Crystal Joy Winfield, born 1982. Crystal was 5 years old when you married your husband. Your husband treated Crystal as his daughter and insisted that Crystal called him Dad.
The solicitor noted the respective assets of Bronwyn and John at the time they became a couple and when they separated. Bronwyn owned furniture and a car with a value of about $5,000 when she and John got together. John had a car worth $1,000 and
some $50,000 being his share of the proceeds of the sale of a former home owned by him and a previous wife.
Tony Mannering described what he called
the present asset of both you and your husband. A home at Sandstone Crescent, Lennox Head, the former matrimonial home, which you value between $250,000 and $300,000. The former matrimonial home is not encumbered by mortgage or debt. Your understanding is that the former matrimonial home is in your husband's name alone.
The solicitor listed a white Ford Falcon worth about $5,000. There was the household furniture, a bank account in the name of her youngest daughter Lauren with a balance of about $700, and an account in John's name, but Bronwyn didn't know how much John had saved.
Throughout the marriage, you and your husband adopted traditional family roles in that you were the homemaker and mother, and your husband worked as a bricklayer.
Bronwyn had been doing some casual work in her friend Robin Shanahan's hamburger and sandwich joint called Eden's Takeaway on Pacific Parade, facing the beach. It gave her some pocket money without affecting her availability for school drop-offs and pickups.
You wish to continue your role as a mother, at least until Lauren is a bit older. Your husband is a qualified bricklayer, although he has had some neck and shoulder injuries which he says have prevented him from working.